Previously, on My Fellow Nigerians, when it became clear that the problem between the northern region and the eastern region were not going to be resolved by negotiations, the eastern region seceded from Nigeria in May 1967 and declared itself the Independent Republic of Biafra. Gowon countered by ordering his troops to retake the eastern region in a police action, and the police action eventually evolved into one of the darkest times in Nigeria's history. A bloody civil war that lasted nearly 3 years, with a death count running into millions of lives and properties.
And I would like, therefore, to take this opportunity to say that I, Major General Philip Effiong, officer administering the government of the Republic of Biafra, now wish to make the following declaration. That we affirm we are loyal Nigerian citizens and accept the authority of the Federal Military Government of Nigeria. That the Republic of Biafra hereby ceases to exist.
January 15, 1970, General Yakubu Gowon accepted the formal Biafran surrender at Dodan Barracks from his former colleague and adversary, Lieutenant Colonel Philip Effiong. Nigeria's victory in the civil war against Biafra made Gowon a hero and a symbol of Nigerian unity. The foreign media famously referred to him as the African Abraham Lincoln for his unprecedented policy of reconciliation and magnanimity to the defeated Biafrans. Most Biafrans believe that their defeat will be followed with massive reprisals and execution of Igbos. Some of Gowon's officers, like Brigade of Guards Commander Colonel Joe Garba, advocated taking a tougher line with the former Biafran soldiers for daring to pick up arms against their colleagues. But Gowon resisted the urge for reprisals and declared a general amnesty for all Biafran fighters and for Igbo soldiers and civilians that defected from their official posts in Nigeria to Biafra. None of the Biafran soldiers were tried or executed for fighting against the Federal Army, and some Igbo soldiers who served in the army before the Civil War were reabsorbed. Some Igbo civilians who fled to Biafra were also reinstated to their jobs they had before the Civil War. Under his no victor, no vanquished policy, Gowon refused to award medals to his own soldiers who fought in the Civil War, as there could be no victory in a war against brothers. Gowon's conciliatory stance even earned him admiration from the Igbos, who knew that their fate would have been very different under a less magnanimous leader. Meanwhile, oil exploration and exportation increased rapidly after the Civil War, and Nigeria joined the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, in 1971. Gowon's reconstructive efforts coincided with an unprecedented hike in oil prices, which brought an influx of revenue to the federal government beyond the country's wildest dreams. Nigeria's earnings from crude oil exports increased by over 500%. Nigeria also became strategically important during the Arab oil embargo on the United States, as it did not join and became the second largest supplier of petroleum to the United States. Although the oil boom increased the spending power of the federal government, it ultimately caused more of a problem than it solved. The massive funds generated by the oil boom encouraged the FMG to embark on a series of unprecedented and grandeur development construction of new multi-lane highways and flyovers, bridges, hospitals, schools, universities, dams, factories, hotels, army barracks, and office complexes. The FMG imported several million tons of cement from abroad for the execution of these projects. This extravagant spending meant that at one point, 20 million tons of cement, which was half of the world's cement orders, were headed for Nigeria. The total amount was 10 times the total amount that the Lagos port could handle in a year, even if they had no other cargo to unload. This caused a massive backlog at the Lagos port, with over 400 ships battling for dock space as they waited to offload in what was termed the cement armada. Some of the cement either sank or was rendered unusable by the time it could be unloaded. An inquiry later revealed that both quantity and cost of the cement had been massively inflated in a scam aimed at squeezing as much money as possible out of the nouveau rich FMG. As funds at the federal level increased by quantum leaps, corruption at federal level was also amplified, from small-time bribery to large-scale racketeering and looting of state funds by government officials. The military proved that it was not immune to corruption after all, and they managed to exceed the scale of corruption practiced by the civilian government they deposed in 1966. The FMG proved inefficient at managing the massive influx of petrodollar wealth and was unable to significantly increase Nigerians' living standard. Although the oil boom created a tiny clique of powerful economic oligarchs and patronage among senior military officers, their families, and civilian associates, living conditions for the rest of the population either remained stagnant or deteriorated. This created the paradox of a rich country with poor people. In January 1975, the FMG decided to increase public sector employees with a massive pay rise exceeding 100%. The increased spending power of public sector workers led traders to increase their prices, triggering inflation and wiping out the economic benefits the pay rise were supposed to create. Private sector workers then went on strike to demand pay rises for themselves. Within the military, some officers were growing increasingly critical of Gowon's government and expected that he would re-energize his regime by replacing the military governors, many of whom had been in office for almost 10 years. Brigadier T.Y. Danjuma was one of those officers, and he believed that the complacency of some of the military governors was giving the army a bad name. The military governors had gone from junior officers to senior officers and gained several promotions in rank, even though none of them had seen military active service for nearly a decade. Gowon was sensitive to the military governors' increasing unpopularity, but kept postponing decisive action on the issue. He announced in October 1974 that he would change the military governors, but by July 1975, he was addressing a conference of soldiers that they would be changed at the end of the year. Some military governors had apparently reconciled themselves to being replaced and decided to engage in a free-for-all bazaar to award contracts before their replacements. By the 1970s, many junior officers had never served under a civilian government and were not familiar with the concept of military subordination to civilian authority. Some of them had truly believed that civilians were subordinate to soldiers, and the phrase "bloody civilians" entered the Nigerian lexicon. Within the military, there was a concern that cadets enrolling at the Nigerian Defense Academy did so not merely for the love of the profession, but rather to give themselves the best chance of one day being appointed to a lucrative political position. There was also the risk that one day, one of these recruits would get tired of waiting for political posts and decide to take such a post by force. Senior officers were also not immune to arrogating themselves above civilians and would sometimes ride on the highway with sirens blaring and gun-toting soldiers in their convoy, knocking civilian vehicles out of their way. Motorists and pedestrians who did not move out of the way quickly enough were often whipped and assaulted. When the Civil War ended in 1970, Gowon promised that Nigeria would return to civilian democratic rule in 1976. However, a few years later, the military considered whether the country's fragile unity could survive the divisive nature of partisan politics. Opinion within the military was not unanimous. While some officers canvassed for an indefinite extension of military rule on the basis that the military was the only institution that could ensure political stability, other officers favored a return to democracy as a matter of principle, but only when the political conditions permitted it and the military government had completed its program. The issue of returning to a civil democratic government was officially considered during the Conference of Senior Army Officers in 1974. While admitting that some officers favored a return to democracy, Gowon claimed that majority of the officers advocated for a continuation of military rule. On October 1st, 1974, General Yakubu Gowon postponed the return to democracy indefinitely. Gowon's decision to postpone was not received favorably by a significant section of civil and military opinions. Some officers believe that the postponement of civil rule blemished the military's reputation as honorable men of their word. The corruption scandals, unpopularity of the military governors, and civil discontent about another delay of the return to democracy created an opportunity for disaffected officers to consider deposing Gowon. Some officers who played key roles in making Gowon head of state and having fought in the Civil War felt disenfranchised at their exclusion from the political decision-making process and their decreasing influence over Gowon. The personal ambition of some officers outside the regime and jealousy of the incumbent military governors were other sources of discontent. The military governors did not help matters with their flamboyant display of wealth, which was damaging to the morale of officers in purely military posting and dented military esprit de corps. Brigadier Murtala Muhammad felt he was Gowon's maker and frequently directed insubordinate criticism at Gowon and other senior officers. On one occasion, Murtala, in the presence of cabinet ministers, said of Gowon, "We shall soon change him. We put him there and we can remove him anytime." While Gowon was a great-time war leader, Murtala accused him of procrastination and indecision in peacetime. Murtala was a thorn in the flesh of not just Gowon, but of other senior officers too, and Gowon found it difficult to act against his insubordination, as it was Murtala who led to the revolt that catapulted him to office. Punitive action against Murtala would have provoked a backlash from officers loyal to him, and Murtala also felt that as the kingmaker who spearheaded the revolt that brought Gowon into power, he had a privileged status enabling him to criticize Gowon. In July 1975, the head of Police Special Branch, MD Yusuf, informed Gowon of intelligence reports regarding coup plotting by middle-ranking officers, and the names that featured prominently on these reports were the same officers that brought Gowon to power. Most surprising on that list was Commander of the Brigade of Guards, Colonel Joe Garba. The Brigade of Guard was an elite unit that was responsible for Gowon's personal security. A skeptical Gowon doubted the reports and found it difficult to believe that his trusted security chief could plot a coup against him, and wondered if he was being misled with false intelligence in order to push him into eliminating his trusted aides. MD Yusuf stressed the legitimacy of the intelligence reports and offered to personally confront Joe Garba with the allegations. But Gowon instead chose to restrain him and said he would speak with Garba himself when he returned from an OAU conference in Uganda. Unknown to Gowon, the entire cast of actors from the July 1966 coup that brought him into power was quietly being reassembled for a sequel 9 years later. According to Joe Garba, the coup plot commenced in April 1975, and at the center of the plot was a group of colonels who had two things in common. One, they took part in the July 1966 coup that brought Gowon to power, and two, they fought in the Civil War and felt excluded from the corridors of power. Although Northern soldiers united in vengeance against Igbos in 1966, in the following decade, Northern soldiers in the mid and upper echelons of the army had become factionalized into pro-Gowon and pro-Murtala groups. These factions largely ran along geographic lines. In the pro-Gowon group were minority ethnicity middle belt soldiers like Colonel Walbe and Brigadier Martin Adamu. In the pro-Murtala group were Muslim soldiers from the far north, including Lieutenant Colonel Muhammadu Buhari, Shehu Musa Yaradua, Ibrahim Taiwo, Abdullahi Mohammed, Ibrahim Babangida, and Anthony Ochefu. The key plotters came from the pro-Murtala group, and the involvement of Anthony Ochefu and Abdullahi Mohammed significantly reduced the risk of detection and prevention, as the two officers were Provost Marshal of the Nigerian Army and Head of the Army Intelligence, respectively. Shortly before Gowon departed for the OAU summit in Uganda, he finally decided to speak to the commander of the Brigade of Guards, Colonel Joe Garba, regarding the coup rumors. Garba denied any knowledge of or involvement in any coup plots. Gowon said to Garba that if indeed you are part of a coup plot, let it be on your own conscience and let it be without bloodshed. I must go to Kampala anyway. Gowon departed for Uganda to attend the OAU summit in July 1975, and that would be his last day in office as the head of the federal military government of Nigeria. Although the colonels had resolved to replace Gowon, they were not independently powerful enough to execute and depose Gowon without the support of senior officers. This level of officers, who were mostly brigadiers in rank, were the men capable of actualizing the colonel's ideas into reality. Some of these senior officers included Brigadiers T.Y. Danjuma, Gibson Jallo, Ilya Bisala, IBM Haruna, and Martin Adamu. Colonel Joe Garba and Lieutenant Colonel Shehu Yaradua operated as the link between the colonels and the senior officers. Brigadier Murtala Mohammed was the most charismatic northern officer in the Nigerian army then, and it would be impossible to stage a coup without his consent, given the following he had in the army. Garba and Yaradua approached Murtala in his Ikoyi residence to seek his cooperation. Lieutenant Colonel Yaradua did most of the talking as he was closer to Murtala. He laid out their grouse against Gowon by accusing him of misrule, which he said was tarnishing the military's honor. He further explained that the plan was to depose Gowon and replace him with Murtala. After listening to their plans, Murtala agreed with their concern about Gowon's misrule and added that his overthrow was long overdue. Although he agreed with the colonel's aims, he refused to physically take part in the coup after witnessing a bloody civil war and limited himself to giving a moral blessing only. The Provost Marshal, Anthony Ochefu, approached Brigadier T.Y. Danjuma and elicited a pledge of passive assistance from him. While Ochefu was at Danjuma's house, Colonel Joe Garba called Danjuma and told him, "Sir, we do not need your help. All that we need from you is to do nothing." Brigadiers Jallo and Bisala also gave their assurances of passive assistance or friendly neutrality. Colonel Abdullahi Mohammed informed Brigadier Obasanjo on the eve of the coup that a coup would occur overnight. Obasanjo asked Mohammed to avoid bloodshed, after which he reported the incident to MD Yusuf. Yusuf appeared unsurprised and simply informed Obasanjo that his men would conduct extra surveillance that night. Joe Garba and Yaradua also approached Brigadier Martin Adamu at his house and asked him to read their coup speech announcing Gowon's overthrow. However, Adamu was less cooperative than other brigadiers. 9 years earlier, he had nominated Yakubu Gowon to become head of state, and he remained loyal to him. Adamu refused to read his speech and pleaded that Gowon should be given another chance and bloodshed avoided. He was reminded that his unwillingness to cooperate might lead to bloodshed. In the early hours of July 1975, the corps officers in the coup, such as Lieutenant Colonel Shehu Yaradua, Abdullahi Mohammed, Ibrahim Taiwo, Ibrahim Babangida, Mukhtar Mohammed, Alfred Aduloju, Paul Tarfa, and Sani Bello, met at the headquarters of the Lagos Garrison Organization to confirm each other's operational orders for the coup. By 2 a.m., soldiers surrounded Lagos Airport, sealed off all approach roads to it, and suspended all Nigeria Airways flights. External communications were also cut off. While Gowon was still in Uganda, he was overthrown in a military coup announced by Colonel Joseph Garba.
There was a bloodless coup today in Nigeria, which is Black Africa's biggest and richest nation and the world's 8th largest oil producer. The overthrow of strongman Major General Yakubu Gowon reportedly was engineered by the head of his personal bodyguards. Gowon received word of the coup while at a meeting of the Organization of African Unity in Uganda. He would say only, "There's nothing to worry about." Gowon, who led a 1966 military coup and put down the bloody Biafran civil war 6 years ago, had been confronted by growing student and labor unrest and charges of government corruption. Last October, he went back on a pledge to restore civilian rule in Nigeria next year.
Fellow countrymen and women, I, Colonel Joseph Nanven Garba, in consultation with my colleagues, do hereby declare that in view of what has been happening in the country in the past few months, the Nigerian Armed Forces has decided to effect a change of the leadership of the federal military government. As from now, General Yakubu Gowon ceases to be the head of the federal military government and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Nigeria. The general public is advised to be calm and go about their lawful duties. However, in view of the traffic situation in Lagos area, all workers other than those on essential services like NEPA, medical services, waterworks, NPA, the P&T, and all tanker drivers will observe today, 29th of July 1975, as a work-free day. A dusk till dawn curfew is hereby imposed until further notice. Nigeria Airways operations are also suspended and all airports and borders are closed till further notice. Fellow countrymen, this has been a bloodless operation and we do not want anyone to lose his or her life. You are therefore warned in your own interest to be law-abiding. Anyone caught disturbing the public order will be summarily dealt with. We appeal to everyone to cooperate in the task ahead. Further announcements will be made in due course. Long live the Federal Republic of Nigeria. News of the coup filtered back to the OAU conference in Kampala, and the eccentric Ugandan leader, Field Marshal Idi Amin, broke the news to Gowon. After brushing off Amin, Gowon took a seat in the conference hall and listened to a speech by the Director General of UNESCO. During the speech, Gowon turned to Usman Farouk, the military governor of the northwestern states, and whispered in Hausa, "What we have always feared has happened." General Yakubu Gowon reconciled himself to the new reality as was his typically conciliatory self. The bloodless nature of the coup was partly due to his refusal to resist it. In an interview with the press, Gowon wished the new leaders well and quoted a few lines from William Shakespeare. "The world is a stage and all men and women merely players. They have their exits and entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts."